On this edition of Independent Sources, the New Americans, a recently launched statewide office, hopes to help new immigrants become entrepreneurs.
What's beneath your tummy? Trying to make talking to your children about sexual abuse a less daunting task.
And honoring the ethnic press, the 11th Annual Ippies Awards celebrates the work of community journalists. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Abby Ashola.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. The Office of New Americans, or ONA, is a New York State agency that seeks to help immigrants assimilate into U.S. culture.
The backbone of the office is a network of 27 neighborhood centers that do everything from preparing immigrants for citizenship exams to teaching them business skills.
I spoke with the director of ONA, Jorge Montalvo, about what the organization hopes to accomplish. Oh, hey, tell us about the office, the State Office of New American.
Yeah, Gary, we just opened up this new state agency of government called the New York State Office for New Americans. The governor is committed to helping immigrants fully participate in New York's civic and economic life, and thought it was important that for the first time in the state's history, we had a single agency focused on this work.
Now, you know, the immigrant population in New York City is well documented. I mean, the city is a city of immigrants and it prides itself on that. But New York State, no one thinks of New York State as a state of immigrant per se. Tell us about why was it important for the state to have an Office of New Americans?
You know, I think for a long time we thought of immigrants as being in New York City. The city and really the state have a long history of welcoming immigrants. But we thought it was very important for the state as a whole to really open their arms and say, we, unlike other states that are building up physical walls and barriers, separating out immigrants, we thought it was important for us to say we are welcoming immigrants, and not just in New York City. You know, 1.2 million foreign-born people, immigrants, live outside of New York City.
Give us some points of immigrant enclaves in the state.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. We have a interesting and growing Somali population in Utica, New York, and a great growing population of Bhutanese that are moving into Buffalo and into Syracuse. Many are refugees. Mm-hmm. They come here seeking a better life, and they've been welcomed in their communities, and it's really heartening to see that.
Okay. And where else? And what other groups are coming into the state?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of folks from Mexico and Colombia, from Latin America, throughout, especially in what we'd call the southern tier. So in the places like Ithaca, Allegheny County, in upstate New York, even through the mid-Hudson Valley in places like Putnam and Orange County, you're seeing a lot of Ecuadorians, a lot of Guatemalan, foreign-born people coming and moving here and working here. And not just as migrant farmers, but actually staying in the communities, starting their own businesses. It's a very interesting change in what we are used to thinking of just an urban movement, but rather a suburban and rural movement of immigrants in the state.
Now, what is the state doing to help these people? What are some of the programs you have put in place to help them?
So we started with creating the office, and the office, the cornerstone of the work of this Office for New Americans, is the creation or opening up of 27 what we're calling opportunity centers, where immigrants can come and be assisted. They're going to learn English. We will help them learn English because we believe that anyone that wants to learn English should be afforded the opportunity to do so. Mm-hmm. If you come in and you're eligible to be a naturalized citizen, we will come and help you do your form, prepare for the exam, and hopefully help you through and become a U.S. citizen. And you know, immigrants are entrepreneurial. We should harness that energy. 29% of businesses in the state are owned by immigrants. Mm-hmm. It's almost 50 in New York City. Mm-hmm. We need to take that energy and harness it to help immigrants start new businesses.
How do you help them start new businesses? How do you do that?
So at the opportunity centers, you know, an immigrant will come in. Let's say, Gary, you want to start a business. You come in and you sit down. We will help first teach you, the ins and outs of starting a business. Mm-hmm. Then, based on your background, maybe you ran a business in your home country, or you've been here and know a fair amount about business. Or if you have an idea and you're still new to this, we will then, based on what you know, we'll track you into a free 12-week program to teach you intensively what you need to know Or again, if you know a bit about business, sit you down with one-on-one with a business coach. And by the end of both paths, you will have a business plan and you'll be given access to capital that will help you start your business.
So basically, this is not sort of like welfare per se. It's a way to help provide opportunities, open doors for them. It's not a government handouts as people might think of these offices.
That's exactly right. You know, other states have, you know, again, other states are doing different things. Some states are building up walls and separating people out. Other states are create an office to help with constituent services. They come in and help you navigate government. We're taking a different tack. We're saying we need to invest in immigrants. They're a value to our society, a value to our state, and what we need to do is assist them to succeed.
Now, speaking of the value, and it's well documented again in New York City how immigrants have revitalized large parts of the city. Are you seeing that trend upstate and other cities upstate where once blighted communities are being transformed by immigrants?
Yes, you know, we've seen a lot on Long Island, the Mid-Hudson region, all throughout upstate New York. You know, we've seen population leaving the state. What the untold story is that the losses would have been greater, or in some places, like in Rochester, a great example, we have tech companies flourishing, we have bioscience companies flourishing because there's been an influx of new Americans where people who are born there are leaving. These new Americans are coming in and creating wealth and creating jobs. So it's a really great value added to the state. But I'll give you a fun example. Do you farm? Do you like to eat?
Of course, sometimes I do.
Well, food is good. We're hungry. Yet this state, which is a big agricultural state, has lost farms, one farm a day for the last 20 years. That's bad for our economy. We have to bring food in from somewhere else or overseas. It's bad for our environment.
And it's not good quality food. The closer it's growing, the better it is for us.
That's exactly right. So what we're going to do as part of the Office for New Americans is assist immigrants with backgrounds in agriculture to start their own business, not to work on a farm, which is good, and we're going to continue to do that, but for those that have that entrepreneurial spirit and want to start a farm, their own business, and then employ people, we're going to help them do that.
The city has had the mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for quite some time now. How closely did you work with them when you were setting up this new office?
We, you know, the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Affairs is one of the first offices in the country of its kind. We like to think that we built on the work that they've done. We work closely with them. And the work that other offices of that type in other parts of the country and in the world have done. You know, it's funny, I had a web video conference the other day with a gentleman, the Jorge equivalent, in a state in Germany. Okay. And they're looking to create an office for new Americans in the same style.
The Germans, I guess.
The Germans, the office for Germans. And they would like to do something just like us in New York. And they were actually talking about, we discussed, how did we do it? And what can they learn from us as New York as a model for what they're doing? So we're really excited about what our colleagues are doing around the country in some places and what we're doing here in the state and the city of New York.
So if we need more information about the office, how do we get more information?
Yeah, you can find where your closest opportunity center is, the Office for New Americans, at newamericans.ny.gov.
All right, Jorge Montalvo, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Still to come on the show, one author tries to make talking to your children about sexual abuse a little easier.
Before that, Zyphus LeBrun has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from New York's ethnic and community media. From El Diario La Prensa, it's official. A federal judge has ruled that a New York City transit rule requiring subway passengers to carry an ID with them at all times is unconstitutional. The ruling comes in response to a lawsuit filed by the New York Civil Liberties Union on behalf of two photographers. Both men were cited for taking pictures of subway cars at a Queens train station in 2010. They were then arrested for failing to produce a photo ID. The judge ruled the law too vague for both the public and law enforcement to know what was meant by ID. The judge also said the law could be interpreted as arbitrary and discriminatory. News India Times reports that two Indian-American lawyers are running for public office in Brooklyn. Nataraj S. Bhushan recently announced his candidacy for City Council of New York, City's 48th District of Brooklyn. He hopes to unseat council member Michael C. Nelson. Roughly 25% of residents in that district are Asian, including Pakistanis, Indians, and Filipinos. Meanwhile, Abe George, who was once the Manhattan Assistant District Attorney, is working to become the next Brooklyn DA. George reportedly may face a tough time in his quest to unseat District Attorney Charles Hines, who's been in office for 23 years. The family of the late African-American media icon Gil Noble is hoping to preserve his legacy with the creation of a foundation in his name. Noble is the former host of ABC's Like It Is. The show premiered in the 1960s and was the leader in programming about the African-American community. Noble's daughter, Lisa, told the Amsterdam News she wants the foundation to be a comprehensive center for the African-American experience that mirrors her father's work. An official launch party for the foundation was held recently at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem. The ex-girlfriend of the late celebrated artist Jean-Michel Basquiat is planning to reveal several of his never-before-seen works. When Alexis Adler began living with Basquiat in the late 70s, she witnessed him create a slew of paintings and drawings. Adler kept most of his work, including notebooks, postcards, and painted clothes. Even after she purchased the East Village apartment they shared, she never painted over a mural he created. Over 30 years later, Adler, who is now an embryologist at NYU, has enlisted a team of advisors to help her gather the materials for an exhibition sale. Basquiat died in 1988 and became even more celebrated. That from Art Info. And finally, the Jewish Daily Forward profiled Jason Littman, a gay American Jew who has become the life of the party. Littman is a successful promoter of gay Jewish events that happen in various New York City clubs. Each event is loosely themed to Jewish holidays like Sederlicious, which happens before Passover, and High Homo Days, which rings in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Littman, who's been dubbed the king of gay Jewish nightlife, is known to attract up to 1,000 people to his events. Those were just a few stories from the ethnic and community media. Independent sources will be back right after this.
My name's Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Rich?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
A new book called What's Beneath Your Tummy Tum hopes to make it easier for parents and children to deal with the issue of sexual abuse.
The just-released book is meant to mark April's designation as a National Child Abuse Prevention Month.
I spoke with author Michelle Brito about what inspired her to write the book and why so many parents agree that this is an important and often scary topic. What inspired you to write your children's book, What's Below My Tummy Tum?
What's Below Your Tummy Tum? It's funny because What's Below My Tummy Tum was the original title, but we just changed it to your. What inspired me was the countless stories that I heard from adults as well as children, and them not having a language for different things about their body, and almost being like the body, the sacred parts of the body, the private parts, their vagina, their penis, were almost taboo parts that they couldn't mention, they couldn't say. So they couldn't communicate. And I have a 4-year-old, so when I gave birth to my 4-year-old daughter, I continued to hear more stories. So with having her and continuing to hear the more stories, I realized even more so how fragile children were, especially between the ages of 2 and 5, and even younger than that, are some of the stories that I've heard.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the characters in the book, Lotus and Nesh.
Oh my goodness. Lotus, I thought of Lotus and Nesh, and their names came from, there's a symbolism behind their names. Lotus is the only flower that comes out of murky water to rise above with a strong stem and knows when to open and close, which is very symbolic of life and children. And then Nesh was taken from the East Indian culture. One of the deities is called Ganesh, and he represents the removal of obstacles. So without going into religions and, things too much, I just wanted the essence of those names, which was, to remove obstacles, and Lotus to, represent, once you give children something and you give them a strong stem, they're able to know when to open and close, and it empowers them.
Okay. Well, it's been reported that often abusers choose vulnerable children. So how do we get a book like this in the hands of children whose parents aren't as in tune?
Well, if you go to the website, it explains it a little bit more, enlightenmebooks.com. And it's interesting because when parents first hear about it, when you say what the book is about, if you say, well, it's a book to prevent sexual abuse, what usually happens is parents are like, oh, they're like, kind of, it's interesting. They think it's a good idea, but at the same time, it's like, well, how do you address that without scaring them? And in all actuality, it's actually scaring the parents and not the child. Because the book, it's not, if you look at it as an empowerment tool as opposed to a book about preventing sexual abuse, it has a very different feel to it, because that's usually what I say. It's an empowerment book for children to empower the whole child and not break the child off into pieces like, these are your eyes, this is your nose, this is your mouth, and then you skip over the most major body parts.
And abusers often use fear as a tactic to abuse children. What tools of empowerment are you giving parents to teach their children in order to not be afraid to speak up or, speak out against their abuser?
Well, the first thing we're doing is acknowledging the fact that their body parts, they're not, anomalies. There's something that belongs to them, and they can know the correct names of them is the first thing. The other thing is, in my book, it uses breathing techniques. For each page that the child reads, they take a breath, because it's been proven that every time you take a breath, it kind of resets the nervous system and affirms whatever it is that you're doing. So through each page, the child is engaged. It's very interactive. In addition to that, there's a coloring piece to the part of the book. So you're teaching the children their correct names of their body parts. Also, you're giving them power, because throughout the book it talks about, I am the power. I can say no. And it kind of rhymes. There's a nice flow to it. So they're learning something that's very empowering but fun at the same time. And I think that's what kind of, makes it stick, because I've used it with the kids that I work with the children that I work with. And I've really been pleased with what I've gotten from the children that I've worked with using the book, and the parents as well, some of the feedback that I've gotten. And being able to create a book that's not scary, that makes it seem like, yeah, you can say the word vagina, it's okay. You can say penis, it's okay. These are not bad words. I think we sexualize things too much as adults, which makes children afraid. And it's actually our own fears.
Okay, I just want to read something. Based on data collected from state child protective agencies, the National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System found a 62% decline in the rates of sexual abuse from 1992 through 2010, with the largest drop occurring in the late 90s. What do you think is changing?
I think parents are a little bit more open. At the same time, I think some cases go unreported, unfortunately. It's great to know that there's been a drop. However, I think the highest rate of sexual abuse happens in foster care, which is another topic altogether, which is another thing that inspired me to write the book, because the kids are changed from home to home. They never really get to tell their story, because they have to mask it, because they have to mask themselves every time they go from one home to another. So I think what's making it decrease is parents being, a little bit more open. At the same time, I don't see many tools out there for working with parents, with their children, because they're still very much afraid, especially when I go into the schools. They'll teach a child that's in first grade HIV and AIDS, but they will not teach them how to protect themselves against sexual abuse, which I find very interesting.
Well, going back to what you just said about it happening in foster care, earlier I asked about vulnerable children and it happening to vulnerable children more often. How do you get a book like this in their hands if they're in foster care or in situations like that?
Well, right now what I'm doing is, I've worked in foster care for many years. I work in the school system now. I'm going to the foster care agencies, to the daycare centers, and right now I'm coordinating something with Coalition for Hispanic Family Services. And we're going to make sure that we bring these books into the foster homes and into the counselors and into any type of workplaces where they can actually utilize them. And that, we'll start there and we'll go from there, because I'm doing a lot of donating. There's a lot of donating that's taking place with regards to people who, don't have the funds. I do as much as I can because I am self-published right now. And so far, the feedback that I've gotten has been really good, to the point where, people are ordering in large quantities because they realize that, wow, this is not even a scary book, but the topic is so important.
Great. Also, you provide a space in the book where children can list the safe people in their lives. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's one of my favorite parts in the book, and the children as well.
Great. But how do parents encourage kids to know who is actually safe? Because sometimes abuse happens from people that they know and their family members.
Well, thanks to Jerry Craft, because that was something that he knew was very important to me, the illustrator, Jerry Craft. We did a great job with collaborating with that, because what we have on our safe page list is a list where the children write their names on one side, and then the adult writes who they think are safe, and then there's a third list where they collaborate to agree on those people. So it's a collaboration, yeah.
Okay. And what are some of the sexual abuses that you list in your book? I know you mentioned kissing.
Well, they're not, well, obviously they're not listed as such, but what I do is, what I try to do is to remember every story that I've ever heard of sexual abuse from the children and from the adults. And the things that we address is, a lot of abusers, they don't necessarily touch the children, they make them touch them. Or, they make them watch them. So I can only tell you how divinely I was able to portray that in the book, because you think, how could you say something like that in the book? But what I did was, there are images in the book. The illustrations help tremendously, where there's a rhyming part, the parts of your body belong to you. They're not for me to touch or view, things like that. So I address each and every one, but on a level that a child can understand, because a lot of perpetrators will do that. Well, can you touch me here? Or the stories go on and on. So I try to remember each and every scenario that I possibly could, from same sex to opposite sex, from the teenage babysitter to, you name it. I tried to cover as much as I could.
Okay, so how can people get a hold of your book?
You can get a hold of my book by logging on to enlightenmebooks.com, and you can order from there. I'm also having 2 book signings on April 6th and April 7th. One is at Rudy's Pastry Shop in Ridgewood, Brooklyn, and the other one is at Uptown Sisters Bookstore on April 6th. April 6th is actually the Sisters Uptown Bookstore, and April 7th is Rudy's Pastry Shop.
Wonderful. Well, Michelle Brito, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to spread the word.
You're welcome.
Okay.
When we come back, recognizing excellence in ethnic and community media.
finally from us, the Ippies Awards marked their 11th anniversary last week, honoring excellence amongst journalists in community and ethnic media.
This year's event brought attention to outstanding Hurricane Sandy coverage. Producer Sarah Pizon filed this report.
New York's vast and diverse community was reflected in the music, the foods, and the winners at the 11th Annual Ippies Awards. The City University of New York's Graduate School of Journalism welcomed over 150 professionals to recognize outstanding journalists in the ethnic and community press. The keynote address focused on the importance of New York's growing immigrant population and the shrinking coverage it gets from the mainstream media.
Why, as I was reading the amazing array of winning entries for the Ippie Awards, did I feel like I somehow missed those huge stories?
This year's winning entries were dominated by outstanding Hurricane Sandy coverage.
The aftermath of Sandy gave a lot of community and ethnic journalists a special opportunity to tell their stories.
You see in a disaster like Sandy just how community journalism is so necessary, and that there are some stories that community journalism is going to do better than anyone else.
First place is Sinovision.
This was the case for these winners.
Extremely excited. We both screamed and we just couldn't believe that we won.
10月29号那场突如其来的飓风把人们再次扔回。
Fan Bu and Mumi Zhao won Best Video for a piece about the struggle of Chinatown residents in the aftermath of the storm. They say winning this award is a big victory for the Chinatown population.
Lots of people felt that it was overlooked by the city government, so they needed an advocate to let the government know that they're being neglected, and we were serving that role.
There were more than 180 entries from over 50 publications, making this year a challenging field for the judges.
This was a very rigorous judging process. Each category was reviewed by 3 judges, drawn from the CUNY Journalism School faculty as well as professional journalists.
Other winners were also rewarded for pieces on education in the Bronx, underground contaminated water in Bethpage, Long Island, and a profile of the world's strongest girl, a 10-year-old from Fairlawn, New Jersey, who can lift up to 215 pounds. Nicora Gomez, who won 3rd place in Best Social Issue Story and Best Immigrant Community Story, says that winning this award gives undercover neighborhoods a voice.
We really view it as an opportunity to add to the conversation and add different perspectives to sort of the things that are happening that wouldn't be told otherwise.
But even with their winnings tonight, there are still members of the ethnic press who long to have their stories reach a wider audience that only the mainstream can offer.
As an Indian reporter, and especially I do a lot of radio, it is so difficult to get my pieces on air.
Rama Reddy Raghavan won Best Honorable Prize for an audio piece on the Sikh community. She says New York's mainstream media needs to be more aware of its local neighborhoods. Esme Tricolita agrees.
I still think that, reporters like me and editors like me really need to work a lot harder to ensure that those stories are also appearing in, the so-called mainstream.
A full list of the winners can be found on the Center for Community and Ethnic Media website. For Independent Sources, I'm Sarah Pizon.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Till next time, be independent-minded.